Hi, this is Dr. Joe Green, head pastor of Antioch Assembly Church located in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, also the founder of the 2019 movement, and I want to share a couple of thoughts with you. I'm sending out an urgent request, especially for those in Pennsylvania. There's a very urgent issue that I want to talk to you about. Senator Stuart Greenleaf, some of you may be familiar with. I've been working with Senator Greenleaf for the last about 12 to 18 months, and we've been doing a lot of working together on some of his legislation that he's trying to pass. And the reason I've been working with him is because it lines up with what we've been doing with the 2019 movement. And the two major initiatives that he's very passionate about are criminal justice reform and human sex trafficking legislation. Criminal justice reform and human sex trafficking legislation. Now, Senator Greenleaf, who's been a state senator for many, many years, is retiring. And so December 1st, he will no longer be a state senator. And he says he believes that God is moving him to a different initiative. It'll be the same things that he is working on, but he won't be doing it as a state senator.
Today to speak on the Safe Harbor Bill, Senate Bill 554. The Senate unanimously approved the measure in April of 2017, but the House of Representatives has yet to approve it. The reason this bill is so important is that we are talking about innocent children who are being taken advantage of and subject to prostitution by human traffickers. All across this Commonwealth, yes, our Commonwealth, not some foreign land, not someplace else, in Pennsylvania and the nation, there are girls and boys under the age of 18, significantly sometimes under the age of 18, are sold into modern-day slavery by sex traffickers every day. But these are children. They are our children. They lack the ability to consent to the criminal action they are being forced to commit. Many of these victims suffer from a litany of psychological issues that require understanding, compassion, and treatment, not prosecution and further victimization. Thousands of children are coerced into sexual servitude each year and have been charged with crimes such as prostitution and drug trafficking, and we're treating the child as the criminal and the criminal as the victim. It's perverse. It's despicable. Human trafficking is the world's fastest growing criminal enterprise, second only to the drug trade. According to Polaris, an organization dedicated to the global fight to eradicate modern slavery, human trafficking is a form of modern slavery, a multi-billion-dollar criminal industry that denies freedom to 24.9 million people around the world, including Pennsylvania. Here are some of the statistics from the National Human Trafficking Hotline and Polaris Be Free text line. More than 40,000 total cases of human trafficking have been reported to the hotline in the past 10 years. The hotline annually receives multiple reports of human trafficking cases in each of the 50 states and D.C. It's not limited to some foreign country. It's right here in our backyard. The number of human trafficking cases that Polaris learns about is in the United States, that every year it's increasing. 20% of texting conversations on the Polaris Be Free text line were from survivors of human trafficking, compared to 13% of phone calls on the hotline. The hotline averages close to 100 calls per day. Globally, the International Labor Organization estimates that there are 4.5 million people trapped in forced sexual exploitation globally. And a 2014 report, the Urban Institute estimated that the underground sex economy ranged from 39.9 million in Denver, Colorado, and 290 million in Atlanta, Georgia. And no state is immune to this. It's in the millions, each state. Over 100,000 children are exploited through prostitution in the United States, and additionally to the matters that I just mentioned. According to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, of nearly 25,000 runaways reported to the center in 2017, 1 in 7 were likely victims of child sex trafficking, and that's where our missing children are. We've seen those children. We've seen the ads, where is this child? We've seen the pictures. They're on milk canisters and bottles. Where is our child? Where are they? Well, with what they are is they're most likely, they're involved in sex trafficking because they were ensnared by a cunning predator, sexual predator, and then abused and taken advantage of. At least 34 other states have already passed a safe harbor law. Why is it taking Pennsylvania so long? Why has the House not passed this bill? It's there waiting to one vote, and it's over with, though we'll have it. We'll be protecting our children. Are we so callous that we're going to ignore this? The Safe Harbor bill would divert exploited children from the criminal justice system and recognize them as victims of human trafficking, not criminals, and refer to state social agencies for care and rehabilitation, not for punishment and prosecution. There is no such thing as a child prostitute. They are children, not legally capable of such consent. And as I've stated previously, the legislation will require law enforcement to report any encounter with a minor who has been subject to sexual exploitation. The legislation will provide safe, long-term housing, education, life skills, training, and counseling to the children who've been exploited. That's what they need, not prosecution, not ignoring them, not reaching out to them and taking them in our arms and rehabilitating them and caring for them. No, we put them in jail and we prosecute them. I would point out that this legislation was drafted with the assistance of the District Attorneys Association and organizations advocating for the elimination of human trafficking. In addition, a public hearing and several press conferences have already been held by the Judiciary Committee on this legislation. Now is the time to prevent the child victims of this heinous crime from gaining a criminal record and being unjustly punished, punishment while the real criminals go free. Stop treating our children as prostitutes and criminals and the Johns and the traffickers as the victims. Stop. Given the critical importance of this legislation, I firmly believe we should be prepared to return to session as soon as the House gives final approval of the measure so that the Senate can immediately act on the bill and send it to the governor for his signature. We should be prepared to return to session up until Sonny die. Do not Sonny die this session until we pass that bill. That would be a tragedy. That would be turning your back on our children who are every day abused and subject to prostitution against their will. Stop treating our children as prostitutes.
So what he's trying to do is he's pushing legislation SB 554 in the Pennsylvania Senate. Now, the House of Representatives just needs to vote on this legislation, and it's called the Safe Harbor legislation. Now, sex trafficking, human sex trafficking, is something that's really a critical issue that we're dealing with right now. Now, it's gotten a lot of press with the Catholic priests that have admitted to victimizing young children. There's a lot of people with the Me Too movement that talks about, people being sexually abused or raped or molested and those type of things. It's getting a lot of press. But one of the things that we don't hear as much about as we probably should is human sex trafficking. here's one of the things that I found. Last year, many of you may be familiar with me, Senator Greenleaf, Senator Street from the Philadelphia area. We did some public hearings, some senatorial hearings on criminal justice reform. We also were talking about human sex trafficking legislation, but we didn't get to spend as much time on it. The thing that I saw the most, we did it in Harrisburg, Pittsburgh, and Philadelphia, was that many people that showed up to these public hearings were people that were directly affected by the issue. And although that's all well and good, and we need as much community support as possible, what I don't see as much of is people that aren't directly affected by it. And so many times there's a type of a spirit of complacency that people have because they may not understand how critical the issue is. They may not recognize the extent of the issue, or there's a lot of times that people have this mentality that if it doesn't directly affect me, then I'm not really that concerned with it. And that's unfortunate. So as a human being, but especially as a Christian and as a pastor, I implore you to get involved in this because unfortunately, it doesn't get pushed forward unless the community as a whole puts pressure on the candidates and politicians to push this legislation. And I would say, because the session is about to come to an end, call your local state representative, tell them that you want SB 554 pushed through before the end of the session, because what the fear is that Senator Greenleaf, who has been very passionately pushing this for many years, once he gets out of office, if nobody else takes up the mantle with the same passion and the same tenacity as he has, this issue may fall by the wayside. And we can't afford for this legislation to fall by the wayside. We lose young people all the time. The statistics are staggering. Just this year alone, one of the agencies reported 199 occurrences of human sex trafficking that have been reported so far just in Pennsylvania. The numbers are staggering of the victims of these crimes. And as a Christian, the Bible tells us the golden rule is that we have to love our neighbor as ourselves, which means that it can't be just the things that affect me directly or people that are close by me, but I have to have as much love and desire for my neighbor's children to be safe, and my neighbor's daughters and sisters to be safe as well as I would like mine. And I would just, I shudder to think of what would happen if one of my children were involved in this human sex trafficking scourge on our community. And so I implore you to get active, be proactive in this, share this video, call your local senators. And this is not just in Pennsylvania, but all over the country. Some states have better legislation than others, but this has to be something that we become passionate about, because many of us have gotten victimized by it, but ultimately it affects us all. Again, that's SB 554. It's in the Pennsylvania State House of Representatives. And again, we want to just continue to push this over the top. This has been Dr. Joe Green. Peace and blessings to you.
Working to rehabilitate the victims of human trafficking. I'm Jill Horner. This is Comcast Newsmakers. With me is Pennsylvania State Senator Stuart Greenleaf. Thanks so much for being with us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
You had a piece of legislation that was passed, and it established the crime of human trafficking. Let's start there. Right. What did that do in terms of establishing the crime, and what's now in place in the Commonwealth?
Well, believe it or not, Pennsylvania didn't even have a crime for human trafficking other than labor trafficking, and that's important too, but it didn't cover sex trafficking and other types of trafficking. So we established a crime now in Pennsylvania if you're involved in human trafficking, you're what they call a pimp. I don't like calling them pimps because they're not. They are sexual, violent, habitual predators. That's what they are. A pimp is just too good of a term even for them. And so if you're involved in this, you should get out of it really quick, because it's very, very stiff sentences for being someone who ensnares another person. It's slavery. They enslave them, and then they use them to produce money. They trick them. They put them on drugs. They're good psychological manipulators, and they make people think that they're their father or their brother or somebody that they trust. That's how sick the whole process is, and the victim, the one that's being trafficked, is the one who's subject to all this manipulation.
And in the past, the individual who has been the victim has also been the one who has been prosecuted, has been penalized within this system. You are working to change that with another piece of legislation. Talk to us about how that would work.
Yes, right. There are three parties here, and we should stop. There's the criminal. There's two criminals. There's three. Two of them are criminals. One of them is not. But we're treating the one who is not the criminal as the criminal, and we should be treating the person who's being trafficked as the victim, not the predator, and not the person who's buying these services. They're both criminals, and they're engaging in criminal activity, and they're fostering the activity. And so what we're trying to do now, the first bill we passed last session, is to establish that as a crime, and the penalties and very stiff penalties are involved in being involved in this type of activity. And some of our local prosecutors have done a great job in appropriate cases of putting some of these traffickers in prison for a long time. But now the next piece of legislation we're dealing with now is, how do we rehabilitate the person who's now been brainwashed, subjected to drug addiction, subjected to sexual abuse for years? And we often thought of, I remember seeing those photographs on the milk cartons where it had a picture of a child on it. Well, I asked the law enforcement, and I lost some people that are experts in this area. They have found that yes, there are some of those children, a lot of those children are snared into sex trafficking. They spend years, decades involved in it. Sometimes we don't even find them until they're adults. But this legislation specifically deals with children and how we rehabilitate them, that they shouldn't be charged with a crime. They can't consent to this. They're children. They don't have the ability. They don't have the mens rea to consent to having sex with another person. And anyway, it's forced. It's intimidated, and it's forced anyway. So it's not. They shouldn't be charged with a crime. What they should be treated for as being treated as a victim. And that's what this new legislation does. Human services, getting off the drug addictions, getting off the twisted manipulation that they went through to realize that they were the victim, they're not a criminal, and to put them back in society. And we should put all of our efforts into this, because this is a terrible activity, and this is what's happened is they've been enslaved into this activity, and we should do everything we can to rehabilitate them.
Thanks so much for being with us.
My pleasure, thank you.
We've been talking with Pennsylvania State Senator Stuart Greenleaf. I'm Jill Horner.